Hafide, welcome to another edition of The Interview. August 3rd pretty much seems like tomorrow. So let's get you introduced to another candidate vying to be Guam's next delegate. Joining me in studio now is the candidate under the Republican ticket, candidate Leon Guerrero. Hafide, Ken.
Thank you very much for having me. I really look forward to this opportunity to speak to you and the people of Guam.
And people, you're no stranger to the public eye, at least on the political realm. Whenever we see you, you're there.
I have been a community advocate. It was one of the proudest things I've ever done. Since 2007, I have been representing the people of Guam before legislatures, governors, administrations, departments, and a couple of times even before the federal government, testifying on public policy, bills, against public policy, against bills, but representing the people of Guam, because all too often the way politics works on Guam, the people of Guam have been cut out of participating in the politics. I'd go to a public hearing on something very crucial like raising taxes or something, and all we have is an endless parade of government managers, department heads, assistant department heads, controllers and employees, but nobody talking for the people of Guam. That's where I would step in and talk for the people of Guam. I testified against a number of bonds that I was able to convince senators to not pass. I testified on a number, I can't even tell you how many pieces of legislation I testified on. I even did a voter initiative drive because so many people wanted to make changes in government, but the politicians wouldn't make these changes because they didn't want to. Things like 21 legislature, part-time legislature, no primary election, to open up government to more participation by the people of Guam.
And that's been the goal whenever the election year happens. They're trying to get the voters to really come out and cast their vote. And like you said, empower them to speak their mind and to make sure their voices are heard.
Then why do they eliminate tens of thousands every election cycle? Just because they didn't vote the last election cycle, that's no reason to eliminate them. There's a lot of things, and that's part of my platform, we'll get into it later, but I'm running for office because I feel we need to have a representative that has a focus on the needs of our people in Washington, D.C., considering that 44% of the government's budget, or close to that, comes from Washington, D.C. We need someone that's over there spearheading an effort to get federal officials to look at Guam differently. And that's one of the reasons why I'm running for office.
Bring me back to the moment, Ken, if you can recall, when you decided, I'm going to go pick up that packet, I'm going to be Guam's next delegate.
I was listening to Sean Gumatautau on the radio talking about what a great Republican event they were going to have, and they were going to have video messages from Donald Trump and the new party chair. And coming out of that, I didn't hear or see anything about what the Republican Party of Guam was going to stand for the people of Guam. And having run as a Republican candidate twice, I could see a big disconnect between the party and the people. In fact, if the laws were different, I would have run as an independent candidate, but I'm not allowed to do that. I have to either run as a Democrat or run as a Republican. I've been a Republican my entire adult life. I even worked for the Senate leader in Hawaii, the Republican leader in Hawaii, when I was in Hawaii. So when I came over here, I had hopes that the Republican Party on Guam would grow and evolve, recruit and bring new blood into the party and train these people and support these people so that we could have a strong Republican Party. But as you can see over the past few elections, the Republican Party has not lived up to the aspirations I had as a Republican. And when you look at the policies that the Republican parties have the Republican Party of Guam has stood behind, they haven't been very conducive to improving the quality of life on the people of Guam. So that's why I ran the voter initiative process, to make the parties more accountable to the people of Guam. But the level of fear on this island because the people of Guam are economic hostages. Everybody was in favor of 21 senators, part-time legislature, eliminate the primary, separate the prosecution division of the attorney generals from the legal side so that we have an elected prosecutor instead of elected attorney general. But when the petitions came out, people would refuse to sign. Oh, I can't sign that. You know, my daughter, you know, she works over administration, and my son, he's a firefighter. You know, I can't sign that. The people of Guam are afraid of our politicians. The only place the people of Guam feel a sense of safety is in the voting booth. And that's the way our system is set up, so that people can go and vote privately and confidentiality on how they see our government going for. But when the political parties limit the choices, I mean, we see the same candidates year after year after year after year, very little new blood brought in. Okay, same thing's happening at the congressional level. So that's why I want to run for Congress, because we have serious problems facing our island and our country. And what we need to do is we need to get new blood into Congress. We need to get people into Congress that are more concerned about serving the people they represent instead of serving the party in power. We saw that with the impeachment of Donald Trump. A lot of politicians, especially on the Republican side, they didn't want to vote to impeach Trump because they didn't want to be primaried. So I'm doing a reverse primary. What's what we need to do as a nation? We need to have people who are not members of the political machines run for office, so that we can break the hold that party politics has on our government and return it more to the government our founding fathers envisioned, of citizen legislators who would come in, spend a few years, and then go back to their lives. But what do we have now? We have people in there 20, 30 years, and they don't want to be primary because they like their cushy jobs and their high salaries. So what we need to do is bring a whole new core of people coming into Congress to change the way Congress operates and do a better job representing the people that put them in office than they do representing the party that put them in office.
Okay.
And that's why I'm running for congressional office.
Certainly going to be a race to watch, no doubt. Thank you for sharing what your journey has been and your decision to pick up a candidate packet. But we want to hear more about your platform in just a moment after this break. We'll be right back with more of the interview. Welcome back to the interview. Let's get back to speaking with candidate for Guam's delegate under the Republican ticket, Leon Guerrero. Hafa Ken.
Thank you very much for this opportunity.
Of course. And so now let's unpack your platform.
Well, my platform is very simple. As a Republican, I believe in smaller government. We look at government of Guam. Just in the few years, we've gone from $400 million budget to over $1 billion budget. We haven't seen our population triple. We haven't seen our economy triple in size. And if anything, as a result of the economic collapse, which started in 2016, and I campaigned about that, we've seen our major industries all go into decline, but we haven't seen the revenues drop. I mean, the government expenditures drop. It's the same thing in Washington, D.C. There are a lot of programs that work, there are a lot that don't, but under the current administration in Congress, we've seen the Defense Department budget be exceeded by the debt service. We haven't seen that much of a dramatic increase in the quality of life of the people, because all of the money that's going into the federal government right now is being aligned primarily to debt service, which is forcing cutbacks in every other program that made life good for the people of the United States, including here on Guam. So getting finances of the government under control and making sure that Guam is well represented, because right now when they cut a program, who's going to take the hit? Guam with one non-voting delegate, or Texas with 39 voting delegates? So you see, this is the problem we face, and I believe I can make alliances with the people in Washington, D.C. at the representative level in government bureaucracies, because I've done it in the past. When I was working in Hawaii, I was a Republican, but I was working with Hawaii Government Employees Association, which is the largest government union, which is very democratic, to the point where 80 to 85% of the elected officials were Democrats. But I was able to work with them because I'm able to build the bridges necessary for the benefit of the people. That's what I've been doing as a community advocate. I've been working with the government, or making sure that the people's needs have been taken into consideration, and it's been a very successful partnership, me and people before the government. So that's what I want to take to Congress, representing the people of Guam before the departments of Guam, the departments of the federal government that are funding the different programs here on Guam, that are providing benefits for the people of Guam, and make sure that those monies are used wisely. We can go through, we could spend a whole show going through how much federal funds have been wasted here on Guam, not used for their intended purposes. And that's why we need to have a representative in Washington that's more concerned about what is happening here on Guam and how we can take what's happening here on Guam to the people of Guam and make sure that those ideas are concerned. So budget, number one. Number two, voter. We need to make it easier for people to vote, not harder to vote. And the Republican stance is against mail-in voting. It's funny because the President of the United States votes by mail. So we need to make it easier to vote and harder to get guns. How many more mass shootings are we going to have? And here locally, the politicians tried to pass a silencer bill, one of the few vetoes I agreed with the governor, because often the sign that you have in a school or in a shopping mall that there's an active shooter is the sound of the guns. So to me, claiming that we need silencers so that people on target ranges don't have to wear headgear, well, guess what? They can wear the headgear because the people in the schools and in the shopping malls, they don't have any warning other than the gunshots. So we need to take smart gun safety regulations at the national level as well as here in the local level. Women's rights. Choice is a very important part of my program. When I was running for senator, I can't tell you how many women at Republican rallies would come up and thank me for my position. Because the last thing men should have the power to do is tell women how to take care of their bodies. Because when people would come up and argue my stance on choice, I'd say, well, what if we were to introduce legislation that men after 35 need to have a vasectomy? Oh, you can't do that. You can't tell us what to do with our body. Oh, so we can't have a law that says men get vasectomies at 35, but we can have one that says women can't have abortions. We need to have a common sense approach. Abortion is a terrible thing. It's the toughest decision a woman will make. I've heard stories of women who have gone through the process. It's not a casual thought. And when you look at the fact that here on Guam, the majority of abortions, very few number, were mostly women who were married. And the reason they probably chose to have an abortion is their economic circumstances did not allow them to have a larger family. So, budget, gun safety, and voting, and women's choice.
Okay.
Those are the four main issues that I want to get involved in.
Okay.
Because these are things that directly affect the quality of life for the people here on Guam. back in the 70s, I'm old enough, women used to have to go with their aunt, high school girls would have to fly with their aunt to Japan. They'd be gone for a couple of weeks, but we all knew what was happening. Do we want to be in that situation? Look at the woman in Texas who recently needed an abortion to save her life, but she had to go to another state. What if she didn't have the funds to go to that state? So we need to put women in charge of decisions about women's health. So those are the 4 key areas of my platform. When I get to Congress, I want to help make sure that these movements and there's support for these things move forward.
Okay. Want to hear more about your goals? Should you exceed past the primary and make it to Congress? But we'll talk about that in a moment. Another break, more from the interview in a moment. Hafide, welcome back to the interview. Joining us again is candidate for Guam delegate Leon Guerrero. Hafide, Ken.
I'm glad we're back.
Yeah. Well, it's great to hear you unpack everything that you have along the campaign trail and your platform. Quite the agenda ahead. But
yes, it is.
Some of the goals I want to now let the voters get in tune with is, should you exceed past the primary and past the actual the general election, what would be your first order of business?
Well, as you know, for the past 15 years, I've been a very vocal, visible community advocate.
Yes, you have.
And standing up for the people of Guam is not easy. It does come at a cost. And as you know, recently, I tried to attend a meeting where public government officials and public officials were talking about spending millions of dollars without public oversight and scrutiny. And so when I went to that meeting, as I was directed by the hospital staff, I didn't just pull it out of thin air. Oh, I think we're going to go down to Dusitani. No, that didn't happen. They told me, oh, you want to go to Dusitani? So I go down there, and when Hyatt, pardon me, it was a Hyatt. And then when I get there, I'm arrested for criminal trespass. And then that is the level of intimidation that people feel here on Guam. And that's why very few people go and testify at public hearings or testify at department hearings. You go to Guam Memorial Hospital and you look at the board meeting, there's all the doctors, there's a couple of administrators, maybe 1 or 2 aides from a senator's office, and that's it. Nobody from the public.
That fear
mindset, because they don't want to be seen as wanting to get involved. When I went to the FBI over the contract to collect receivables for GMH, as soon as I went to the FBI, GMH canceled the contract. See, those are the types of things that we need to have more of. We need to have more public scrutiny of government because it's our money they're spending. And now the reason why I want to go to Congress is there's a movement in Washington, D.C. called Project 2025. And when you read the book, it's scary. It talks about how we're going to turn our democracy into an authoritarian regime. How we're going to reduce the ability of people to give input to the government. And that scares me because government officials without public oversight are the very definition of moral hazard. In other words, when I spend $120 million on a defense system that doesn't work and we scrap it, I don't pay any penalty. It's just as $120 million that didn't go to child education, didn't go to Head Start, didn't go to medical treatments or medical research. So that's the problem. When we don't have public scrutiny over the government process, we have moral hazard left, right, and center. And that's what happened with GMH. There was no public scrutiny, and when I got there, they didn't want public scrutiny, so they had me arrested and removed from the room.
Whatever happened with that case?
It was dropped. Of course it was dropped, but not until it was broadcast all over the internet and, in an effort to show other people what will happen to them if they stand up and speak out against government overreach and abuse. We need to break that cycle. We do that by getting people in Congress who are more concerned about serving their population, their people, the people who put them in office, than they are serving the political party in power. We don't have that now. And we saw that when the Republicans in Congress went on their retreat in West Virginia at the Briar Resort or Greenbrier Resort. Less than half the sitting Republican members went, which shows the division between the Republicans in Congress. That's why we've had the least productive Congress in the history of the nation. And that's why right now they keep kicking the can down the road using the government stopgap funding measure as a target. Unless you pass all this legislation, which is not related to the funding of the government, we're going to shut down the government. That's not how you govern. That's not how you serve the best interest of the people who elected you and put you into Congress to put the people of that district first. And we have to start here on Guam, because this is where America's voting begins. So let's start by putting a delegate in Congress. And people will tell you, the Democratic Party doesn't like me, the Republican Party doesn't like me. The reason I'm running as a Republican is I've always been a Republican. It's just our Republican Party, to me, doesn't espouse the Republican values I would like to see, but I can't run as an independent because the Democratic Party and the Republican Party don't want people to run as independents.
Right.
Because if people run as independents, guess who doesn't have control? The party.
Got it.
So that's why I'm running. That's why I'm running as a Republican. And that's why I hope more people will pick up packets and run for office. Ordinary people picking up packages, because the only way we save our government here on Guam is that we get a wider variety of people in office, not the same ones over and over and over again, because all we have to do is look at their track records. Joseph Augustine passed a bill, 5% just for a few months to get us through the Trump tax cut. 6 years later, we're still paying 5%. But that's 5% coming out everybody's pocket, going into the government, and the government isn't using that money wisely because the quality of the life for people continues to deteriorate. People are leaving Guam in record numbers to the point where pretty soon we won't be able to sustain the next $1 billion budget.
Well, now I want you to address the voters, but we're going to take one more break before we get to that. More from the interview when we return. Welcome back to the interview. Hafaday, I'm Nick Delgado, joined by our delegate under the Republican ticket, Ken Leon Guerrero. Hafaday, Ken.
Oh, it's so good to be here today.
Thank you so much for sharing your journey to your decision to pick up a packet to run as Guam's next delegate, to be very candid and open, speaking about things that you encountered and how you're pretty much sharing your platform here today. But now I want to give you the opportunity to speak to the voters ahead of the August 3rd primary. So if you can just look into that camera there, that's for you, and go for it.
Thank you very much, people of Guam, for even giving me this opportunity to talk to you. Being a community advocate for the past 15 years was one of the highest honors I've been fortunate enough to experience. I cannot tell you what a joy it has been when people come up to me in supermarkets, at Kmart, or down at the beach or something, and tell me how proud they are of the stance I took and how they wish they had the courage to say the things I said. And that is the climate of fear that envelops this island. People have great ideas, but they don't feel safe enough to voice them. We need to break that at every level of government on this island, starting with the local elections all the way up to the congressional office. And as I have represented you for the past 15 years before the governor's office, before all the different departments, and too many times to count before the legislature. I will represent you with the same passion and dedication should I be fortunate enough to get your vote and make a trip to Washington, D.C., where I will proudly and strongly and passionately represent the people of Guam. Because when I'm in Washington, D.C., they will know about Guam and what they can do to help us help them. Ken Leon Guerrero, kind of a Republican, mostly an independent, and maybe if enough of new voters get in, enough new senators get in, we may fix our local political system, but we're talking about Congress. So please vote for me for Congress.
Leon Guerrero, thank you so much for your time. It's been a pleasure, and this will not be the last time we'll be hearing from you before the August 3rd election.
Well,
thank you again. We appreciate it. And thank you everyone for watching. We'll have more candidates coming in, of course, as we get closer to the August 3rd primary. For now, I'm Nick Delgado. Stay safe.